My name is Arvind Sanjeev. I'm from Kerala in India, and I have a background in electronic engineering, and also ventured through a couple of startups and tried a couple of stuff. So I'm very excited here today. Been looking forward to this day for the past 2 months now, and really excited to show what I've been working on and the project I've been working on. So I'll just get started with it, directly with the concept. So my concept is called Lumen. So Lumen is a mixed reality storytelling platform. It tries to reimagine what immersion means today in the context of all the mixed reality technologies that's coming up, like in the field of mixed reality and virtual reality, like HoloLens or the HTC Vive. It tries to take a step back and tries to reimagine what immersion means today. So before I get started with the concept and telling you what it does, I just want to quickly show Lumen to you guys. So this is Lumen. It definitely looks like a flashlight. So there are a couple of example interactions that I have designed around Lumen, and since it's a storytelling platform, and these are example interactions that I use to provoke people's imagination. So these example interactions exist in many places. So one of the places it can exist is in your home. So in your home, imagine you're in this story that has been created by a couple of developers where you're trying to solve this murder mystery, and Lumen is like an intelligent tool that helps you do that. So what it does is that it tries to create all the objects in your home. It makes all the objects in your home part of that story. So if you point it at like an object like this, it says, oh, I found scissors and blood trace found. This is a murder weapon. So it hides pieces of evidence on top of existing objects and normal things in your home, and creates this extra layer of fiction on top of things you are already familiar with. Another thing that I can probably demo with is maybe a coffee cup. Is that an empty? Can I get use this? Sorry. So coffee cup. Yeah. So it's not really accurate, but once you play with the angles and stuff, so it says coffee cup, and it might be a little hard to read, but it says fingerprint found. So it tries to create this kind of creates extra layer of fiction on top of normal objects that exist in your home. Maybe one more time I can show is maybe my hand. Let's see if it gets it. So if it looks at my hand, it knows it's a person. So this is done through machine learning, so it's intelligent to know what it's looking at. One of the other examples I have set up in the home again is if you pointed at the normal appliances in your home, for example, a radio in your home. So if you point Lumen at it, it creates this extended interface on top of the normal radio in your home, and it makes the radio a part of the story. So here it's a story where it's about a space traveler, and it turns the radio in your home into an interdimensional radio, and you can tune into different galaxies and listen to other frequencies and things like that. So it creates extra layer of fiction on top of objects. Another thing Lumen can do is you can tap into other IoT platforms, like for example the Philips Hue lamp. So Lumen can, if you point this at a Philips Hue lamp or any other lamp, it immediately creates this extended interface on top of it, and if you click on it, it turns on, and you can control the light and the colors and things like that through the extended interface. So this is what Lumen can do in the home. So one of the other places where Lumen can live in is maybe in the museums. So in museums, it again becomes a storytelling guide. So if you point it at exhibits, maybe one of the exhibits in your home, in the museum, it brings the exhibits to life, and it starts telling you the story, who made the sculpture, how it was made. And this is assuming that in the future there will be a speaker as well that does voice narration on top of the existing visual that you see. And one of the other places it can again exist is in the city, outside, because this is so portable, you can take it outside and walk around with it. So it becomes like a wayfinding tool. So it takes you to all these secret places in the city that has been set up in the story for you to uncover, and you follow this and go to that places. And finally, one of the other places where I guess Lumen can shine to the fullest is in escape rooms, where it's like a controlled environment, and you can create the environment and make the environment according to Lumen. So if you're in an escape room or a place like that, It creates extended interface on top of like treasures or secret boxes, and you can tap in the passcode and you can open that treasure, or you can point it at the door, and it creates this extended interface and you can unlock the door. So these are just some of the example interactions that Lumen as a platform can afford. And let me just get back to the presentation really quick. Oops. Alright, so my presentation is basically structured in the following way. I start with the concept, talk about how Lumen works, basically the process overview, some of the major highlights from the process I did, the research which I did to arrive at Lumen, prototyping and testing, and finally the future, how I envision Lumen in the future to be. So starting off with the concept, I started off by asking this question: how might we immerse people in an alternate reality using elements from the digital world without isolating them using a headset? So by this I mean that the power we feel while using virtual reality platforms like the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift, we enjoy it so much because we get this unlimited power to play with the digital world and modify elements in the digital world. So I was trying to imagine how we can take that same power from inside the headset and bring it outside the headset so that people can feel more immersed in the natural environment and interact with the environment around them. So this is one of the first questions I start off with. And these are just some of the design criteria I had in mind while working on Lumen. One of them being portability. It should be extremely portable. It shouldn't confine the people to any particular place like the existing devices in the market. So they should be able to walk around with it, move around with it. It should allow them to celebrate the environment around them. It should allow them to engage with the environment and play with the environment, and the existing environment around them should become a part of the story. There should be no screens. The reality shouldn't be confined to any rectangular screen or any sort of small screen like that. And similarly, no headsets. It should live outside the headset and the environment around them. One of the major inspirations and mental models on which Lumen is based on is the flashlight. So the flashlight has always been this iconic symbol of adventure and storytelling, even from our childhood days. We use it to find objects in the dark, we use it to find our way through the dark, and things like that. So for this exploration in this project, the flashlight has served both as a good mental model as well as a good form factor. But in the future, the form factor can also change. It can live in many other forms, like in smartphone cases or even wearable technologies. So moving on to the magic moments. So some of the magic moments I demoed earlier are some of the example interactions that I envisioned Lumen to have. And using these interactions, they can live in places like in homes, in museums for storytelling, in city outside, or even in other controlled environments like escape rooms. So basically how it all works is Lumen has a couple of components inside it, such as camera, depth sensor, projector, a Raspberry Pi. And the core functionality of Lumen is that it's intelligent enough to know what are all the things it's around and it's looking at. And this is done through a machine learning algorithm called the YOLO darknet. So it has already been pre-trained. I haven't trained any of the objects I showed in the demo earlier. So it already knows what the things are in the environment already around them. So this is the core functionality of Lumen, and by tapping into this, we can create this extra layer of friction on top of the objects we know that Lumen can identify. And the fundamental objective of Lumen as a platform is to spark the imagination of people. Once they see Lumen and once they see the interactions that it can do, it should spark their imagination and help them to imagine what are all the possibilities that Lumen can do, and it should help them spark like new concepts and new stories that they can design around Lumen. I also did a bit of market research to learn how Lumen can be pushed in the market today if it was to be an actual product. So these are just some of the famous or popular devices in the field of mixed reality and virtual reality today. And I've classified them in the form of devices that use no headsets and screens, ones that use headsets and screens, and ones which are portable and not portable. Popular devices like the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive fall under the category of relying on headsets, but they are not portable. Whereas devices like the HoloLens and the Google Daydream, the Samsung VR, they rely on headsets. Even though they are wireless, you can't actually call them portable, but they are still confined to a headset. Lumen finds the sweet spot on the top quadrant where it doesn't rely on any headsets or screens, but it's also portable. So this is like a totally untapped area where Lumen tries to explore a new kind of media using which people can feel immersed in the environment around them. Moving on to the process overview, I would like to start this section by quickly showing a video that quickly shows you a couple of the highlights from the process I did with Lumen. And yeah, just you can have a look at it, and I'll talk about it in detail later. These sculptures in the museum, starts telling you the story through the flashlight, and it tells you. Yeah. So moving on to, one of the first things I did after starting the project was I talked with my advisor Lumen, and we made this blueprint, a process blueprint for which we should work on Lumen to make sure that all the important parts of the project get sufficient amount of time to work on. So it started off with simple desk research, following up by rough prototypes for talking to people, deeper concepting, further concepting, iteration, and finally video storytelling and things like that. Moving on to the research, how Lumen came about and how it started. One of the major inspirations I have behind Lumen is imagining a screenless future. How will the future look like if there were no more screens? How would people interact with technology? How will people interact with the environment around them? Is something that really provoked my imagination towards Lumen. And these are just some of the projects from Berg and the Media Lab and Disney Research that further added to my inspiration. One of the other things that also inspired me was LARP, live action role playing. I was amazed to see how people feel so immersed in these alternate realities in a false narrative that they have set up, and using simple objects that they have made in their homes. Not even any technology is involved in it. So that's when I decided to talk to a LARP game master, or Dungeons and Dragons game master. His name is Tools. So Tools has helped me throughout the project from the start to the end, and I've kept him involved through all the stages and all the iterations. And this is just one of the first sessions I did with Tools. So in this session, what we tried to do was I gave him a couple of these fictional objects like a military flashlight and a Polaroid camera, and I asked him to create stories for these objects to live in. Imagine where these objects would live and imagine who would use them. And using the stories that he came up with, I was trying to imagine what kind of interactions these objects can afford in those stories. So this is just one of the first things I did with him. I also did a couple of analogous experiences, like going to escape room with my classmates and trying to feel like what it feels to actually be in this kind of alternate reality. And soon after which I was able to come up with a couple of sacrificial concepts. These are concepts I used to talk with people to help ground them with the same mindset I had in the concept. And a couple of objects came about, and one of the things that eventually became Lumen was something I call the time traveler's torch. So this was like a fictional story that I made up around this torch that used to belong to a time traveler. And someone who came into his home finds this secret or special torch, and the torch starts doing all these kinds of magical interactions with that person, like pointing it to secret places in their home, uncovering secret portals in their home, and things like that. So this is like a sacrificial story I made with these interactions, with which I talked to a couple of people. And it helped me ground my mindset with their mindset, using this as a common thing to talk about, the sketch. So I talked to a couple of experts who are already in the field of latest and emerging technologies, one of them even being Joshua Walton, who was part of the Microsoft HoloLens team. And I was able to get a lot of feedback based on that simple sketch. And some of the things I learned from talking to these experts were what are the major highlights or parts of that story that should be amplified and that should be given more importance. And by talking with them, I was able to understand that things like wayfinding, metadata, external interface creation, etc., some of the things that could be pulled out and further developed. And that's how they grew into Lumen. Moving on to prototyping and testing, I tested out a couple of concept prototypes by thinking about how this flashlight can exist. So some of the concepts I tested out was, what if it was like a storytelling platform for kids, where the flashlight can help them learn new things about the environment and the world around them? What if it's like a storytelling guide in art galleries? You point it at the paintings in an art gallery, and it tells you who made the painting, how it was made. Or what if it was like this kind of a special device where you point it at appliances in your home, and it turns the appliances in your home into physical manifestations of the apps in your phone. So you point it at a speaker, and it turns the speaker into a Spotify player. So these are just some of the concepts I tested out and prototyped. And what I understood is that after doing each of these concepts and each of these iterations, I was able to understand that all of them had these sort of special moments or magical interactions embedded in each of them. And it was really hard for me to just narrow down on a single concept or a single story that can do this. So that's when I realized that this has enormous potential if it was a platform. A platform that has all these interactions that people can use to create their own realities or own stories or own concepts around. That's why I decided to make Lumen into a platform rather than focusing on a single story or a concept. So this is just one of the first prototypes of Lumen. I have it here with me. So it looks like something you can definitely never take to an airport. But it did the job, and it had initial capabilities like basic object recognition and awareness. And it soon evolved into the second prototypes, where I just added a small joystick to try to create the other interactions like mannequin projections or like external interfaces, etc. So soon after testing and making these kind of low fidelity prototypes, I was able to do some preliminary testing with tools. So when he came here, I was able to create this false narrative around this kind of a murder story in which he's a detective from the future, and he has a special flashlight, and he uses it to find the pieces of evidence that is hidden in the house. So by doing this session, I was able to learn a lot of things. And one of the key things that he said was giving the user the power to like control or to like point and click what they want to scan is really important. Instead of just scanning whatever they are pointing at, just doing that deliberate action of clicking a simple button is really important. And that's one of the things I put it into Lumen based on his feedback. So moving on to the building, soon after getting the learnings from the testing session and feedback from other people, I was able to work on building the final prototype. So the final prototype involved mini processes like reverse engineering pico projectors, miniaturizing electronics, machine learning, finishing, polishing, painting, branding, etc. And that's how I came up with the final prototype for Lumen, which you see here today, which is in the form of like a normal flashlight. And soon after which I again did a couple of testing sessions with people within the building. And these are some of the sessions I did. And one of the most striking things that came out from these testing sessions was how people started to like imagine and think about their own concepts in which they can pull Lumen into. So one of the examples was again from tools. He said that it could be used in schools by students in a chemistry class, for example, to point at objects and learn what the chemical composition of that object is. So people started coming up with their own concepts and own stories, and it helps spark their imagination to imaginations in which Lumen can exist as a storytelling guide. And other things also came up, like giving the user things like a sound or haptic feedback is really important, which it currently lacks right now. So moving on to the future, if I had more time in the future, what I would like to possibly do is, first of all, maybe slight technology improvements, maybe adding IMU stabilization to make the projection mapping better, or adding sound or haptic feedback to make it more immersive. And as well as other things like the form factor. I would like to explore the form factor more. Can it access outside of flashlight? Can it be made much more sleeker? And also maybe a bit later, the possibility of partnering with maybe a gaming company or a gaming startup to learn how they can use it to build an end-to-end concept with Lumen. And maybe in the distant future, even like Kickstarter or a fake Kickstarter experiment to see how people will react towards a new technology like this. I also had like a couple of reflections based on the process I had followed through Lumen. So one of the first reflections I had was based on testing. Since I was really scared of the prototype itself because it's really fragile, and there are like a lot of issues like overheating and network connectivity issues. So the first time I tested the tools, it immediately broke off, and and it was like a nightmare to get it back set up. So I've always been, after that moment, a little bit scared of like doing a lot of testing sessions. So that's why I had to confine the testing sessions, at least till today, to the building and people within the building. So I'm hoping to further test with a greater range of demographics and greater range of people outside the building, maybe through the exhibition as an opportunity to do it. And the other thing which I would like to reflect on is one of the major decisions I had to make in this concept was turning it into a platform rather than a single concept or a single story that has complex game mechanics. So that was a hard decision that I had to make, and maybe after this session I would be able to understand if it still makes sense to be a platform, or whether it will be easier for people to understand if it was an end-to-end concept. And the last reflection which I have is basically my journey through CIID. So I came to CIID as an engineer to extend my skills as a designer. And I'm very happy that CIID gave me plenty of opportunities with my classmates to creatively explore a lot of new projects and explore a lot of new topics which I would like to further explore soon after CIID. So with that, I would like to finally close off Lumen with a concept video which I made. A video which I would like to release into the world and see what people would think if it was to be an actual product. Lumen is a new kind of mixed reality storytelling platform that lets people immerse in their natural space. It takes advantage of advanced machine learning and projection mapping technologies. Lumen explores the creation of a new kind of media that takes advantage of the physical world and overlays a layer of digital fiction on top of it. On first look, it looks like a normal flashlight, but it's when you turn it on that the magic happens. Objects around you starts coming to life when you shine Lumen on it. The normal radio in your home becomes this fictional device from the story. Or it can even give you the power to control IoT devices in your home. It tries to create a two-way dialogue between you and the objects around you. All this is made possible by the core machine learning technology that powers Lumen. It makes it intelligent and aware of all the objects it's looking at. By tapping into this platform, you can create your own stories and interactions on Lumen and have people immerse in the reality that you have designed for them. In museums, it becomes a storytelling guide. When you shine Lumen on the exhibits, it starts coming to life and telling you their story. In the city, Lumen becomes a wayfinding tool. where it takes you to a secret location in the city that you're trying to uncover. Or even in escape rooms, Lumen helps you uncover secret portals and secret doors through its enchanted light. Since it is an open source platform, you can imagine and think of your own applications for Lumen. And I can't wait to see how other storytellers will use Lumen to surprise and enchant people. Lumen, reimagining immersion. Thank you.
All right, great job.
Thank you.
Great job. I think there's a lot of good thinking and execution, great execution. I think the concept is really strong. The metaphor of the spotlight, of the flashlight really makes sense, you know, like nice flashing light, shining light on something and discovering something. The idea, I understand that you took an existing enclosure for a flashlight,
yes.
But I like how you built on it and the challenge of putting a micro projector in it. It's pretty cool, and the documentation was really well done. And I probably took a lot of time to take all the documentation of the process. A few comments. I feel there's a tension between like art and design on this. Maybe you felt it yourself.
Yes.
I'm going to comment on it more as a design project, even though you could have taken it the other route, like completely going in the art direction. The one thing is, a lot of the cases that you show, they look really cool, but then it feels like the ergonomics don't seem right. You know, like when you flash something on it and then you have to reach for it, it's a two-hand operation. From like purely designed, functionality perspective, it feels less strong. And I don't know if that's a technical constraint that you're not doing projection mapping, where you're like trying to adjust for corrections, because that's probably a limitation, but it would have been nice because it creates this creepy effect where it's like slightly out of
skewing. Yeah.
But it is on top of, like, I think it was a really good project. It almost feels like, why did you go for storytelling? Why did you define it as storytelling? I would have almost defined it as, maybe you can tell me more why you picked storytelling, but I would have almost described it as a discovery tool, like a generic tool. I mean, you mentioned, kids or whatever, like for everybody, like just pointing at anything, and I think there's a lot more. Maybe you didn't have time because you put so much time already in making it work and building such a thing. But where you shine something, what happens when you shine it on something instead of just recognizing, scissor? It could be, there's so much more that could happen. Wonder why you didn't go that direction.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I did that is I thought if it was like a learning tool or like a discovery tool, it could like have limitations in terms of like you do it one time and you know what it's going to do, and then that's it. The next time you do it, there's nothing new that's going to happen. So I imagine if it was like a storytelling platform, maybe in the next update that comes next year, you have like a new story around the same object, and this time it's something else that's being projected on the top. So it can create this kind of like a retention with every new software update that comes in, instead of like being it something that you know it's going to show the next time you do it again. So creating something new each time and making it fresh. That's why I made it like a storytelling platform. So discovery can also be a part of storytelling in that sense. So it can also be a storytelling platform that also helps you learn and discover things as well. So yeah, that's one of the decisions I took deliberately to make sure that it doesn't get stale or like bored after you point it to the same object again and it shows the same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love the insight of like trying to get out of the headset and on the screens. I think I'm one of the biggest critics of AR and VR in the current implementations. So really good job on that. I feel like you showed like a bunch of examples. I think there are some that are stronger than others, and I mean I would love to see you like keep on exploring what works, and I'm just giving you feedback from a design perspective, or like functionally is the most compelling thing.
Yes.
But yeah, good job.
Thank you.
Maybe to continue on how you train it actually. So how do you actually feed the data, and how do you decide on what is the layer that I see?
So basically, there's no training that's needed. It's already pre-trained based on an algorithm I mentioned called the YOLO.net. So it can identify around 9,000 different objects, common objects around us. That is almost everything. And in terms of the extra layer that you took, yeah. So that layer is being designed by the set of developers who are creating or designing their own reality or story. They create that layer on top of the objects they know that it's going to detect.
But is it going to be the same object every time I use it? So that part is not super clear. So if I point on, well, whatever, the radio, is it going to be the same output all the time?
No, that's depending on the story. So one story might turn it into an interdimensional radio, maybe in the next story it's something else.
Then another question, who creates the stories of context? Or
so since it's like an open source platform, which I envision it to be in the future, there'll be like developers and an app store basically for this kind of a new media, and it'll be from that platform. I haven't explored
have you already thought of how you can incentivize them to create the stories for the content?
Yes, so I've basically been inspired by the HoloLens platform by itself. They have like app stores, and they have development bundles that are being released right now, and they're trying to incentivize developers by giving them perks and giving them like royalties in terms of the apps that they're making. So it's a kind of ecosystem I'm imagining is just like smartphone app ecosystem. There'll be an ecosystem around these kinds of devices that people will be using, and the developers will be incentivized based on the apps they create, and the people who download it, they'll get incentivized in terms of the royalties or the payment for the apps.
Cool, but I very much agree with most of Marco's comments, so I also really like how you use the existing tech to create new experiences for people, and really well done. I love the way you documented your research. It was obvious that you spent a lot of time on that, on creating the video. Also very good that you included all the limitations of the current research and what could be done next, so it's easy to see what you saw of it. So yeah, pretty well done.
Yeah, I agree. Very, very good project. It's really great to see how you put it all together. I mean, I think, and obviously from my background, product design, I'm also the same. I'm kind of anti-screen, so seeing it come, this kind of digital quality happen in the real world is fabulous. I wanted to understand a little bit more about, so this, how do you call it, the software behind it,
YOLO.net.
YOLO.net. So what have they actually done with it themselves? How far have they taken it?
Right now they haven't made any kind of applications. It's like a research project that they did. I forgot the university, but they released the whole platform as like a research paper that was peer reviewed, and people have been using it for all kinds of other kinds of DIY hacks and projects, but they haven't made any sort of strong applications themselves. Some people have used it for like testing small self-driving technologies because it's really good on the road as well. So yeah, it's just a platform that researchers have made and opened up for people to make their own applications.
So what have you done that's different to what they've done, just to be really clear? So I think I understand, but I just want you to say. So
basically what I've done is I've tapped into their platform and created and brought it outside of a screen with a projector. And also created this extra layer of fictions and example interactions that can be overlaid based on top of what they are,
Okay.
So they are giving me the input, and I'm doing everything else, the processing and the output.
Okay. No, I thought it was really interesting how when you this idea that you discover things in the real world, and torchlight, like Martha said, is a great metaphor to be able to do it. I was about to ask you the question, how come you haven't tested it on other groups, kids? I would imagine a bunch of kids would go wild with it, to be honest. I mean, they would love it.
Yeah.
And I think from a more adult perspective, I mean, I would still enjoy this kind of embedded story happening in the real world. But I also was thinking from a digital objects perspective, almost having like a blank digital object where there's no controls on it, or very abstract controls that when I shine something on it, it suddenly brings that object digitally alive for me to control it, and that when I take it away, it doesn't exist anymore. This idea that objects don't become tired and the buttons don't become irrelevant anymore, and obsolescence kind of disappears because the object really is just a token to be recognised by the system to then change itself.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine software updates, you know, in software update, you shine it on a blank object and suddenly the buttons have reconfigured and suddenly something else appears. And it kind of begs for me to go further with exploring what you shine on it and the menus that appear around an object. So I think there's a whole other side there. There's nothing to do with your fictional side, which I still think is interesting. And I think, like I said, I think for a certain audience it will be a fantastic gaming system.
Yeah.
But I think there's another side to it, really, that you just can tap into and open up.
Yeah. Leading on that, the example you just said now was something that really inspired me to work on Lumen, and it was actually first shown by Berg. These objects are these white objects that they designed, and this becomes a Google Calendar, and it syncs to the calendar on Google. And I think this becomes like a YouTube player when you shine a projector on it. They use like a lamp like that to do that. So that is like one of the example things that I had in mind, and I also tested that out through this guy, the Spotify player. But the reason why I was a bit hesitant to go further down that path was like imagining like the ergonomics and things like that I was a bit skeptical. Like if you had to like carry a thing like this and point it at it and do this all the time to control it, you know, I couldn't answer if I get a question like why would people do that every day if they had to like take an object and control another object. So that's when I got a roadblock, and so I didn't want to like stop exploring it. That's why I tried to like take a step back and again explore it through storytelling. And maybe that can come out in the future when, you know, the device can be miniaturized, or it could be made wearable, or it could be on your phone, or so,
it probably is a more miniaturized. You know, I'd imagine if it was, I don't know, my watch or something, a wrist, and you just go like that, and the controls are suddenly there, and then they disappear again.
Exactly.
Where do you think will be the biggest market for that in the future?
For this application, maybe as like a universal controller, maybe. You point it at any objects that you can interact with, maybe a speaker, you can change the volume with the thing you have in your hand, like a band. Or you point it at the lamp, you can change the color. So maybe it can be like a universal controller or a universal device that eliminates the need for any other kinds of technologies that you have to carry with you.
But I think, really well done, and you've managed to achieve a lot in a very short amount of time. So, and I'd love to see how you take it further, but also let a bunch of kids go wild with it and see what their imaginations do with it.
I mean, you came with a strong technical background. What do you think that you challenge yourself with by going through the prototyping process with it? So what is that you really didn't know before?
So I don't think I would have come up with the same thing if I wasn't here. Maybe things like the co-creation sessions which I had in tools was just one of the major things that helped me get inspired and explore all these interactions which I couldn't have done otherwise. So the processes which I learned here, you know, like co-creation and the testing and the iteration sessions which I had with them were some of the things that really helped me go down this path, apart from my technical background were some of the things. But yeah, I try to, I mean, in terms of the technicalities of it, I try to make sure that I don't focus more time on building the technology itself, but by making a whole story, a video that conveys itself, good form factor, good interactions. So yeah, I try to limit myself based on like the process overview I showed earlier to make sure I get done with the technology in this week so that I can focus on everything else. So I made certain sacrifices and like compensations in terms of making it completely functional.
Thank you.
And I think Ruben is here.
Yes.
Do you have anything to add? Since you've flown in especially for the occasion, Ruben is his advisor.
No, I think throughout the process we've been talking a lot about it, and I think what he did in such a short time is amazing, because I agree with Marco as well. It's such a nice platform, and there's so many ways you can go. And we've been talking a lot about also going into the professional world. You know, like the small example of showing a PCB and, you know, like all the components on it. There's even in manufacturing, and there's so many applications where you can apply this kind of technology and concept. So I think it's a great starting point for a lot more. I think you did a really good job in coming here in like eight weeks. It's amazing. 10 weeks. Extra 2 weeks in it. It was a pleasure to work with you. So I learned a lot from this.
Thanks.
I can't, I can't stop thinking about what would happen if you get these to elderly homes, because I think you guys went through the people-centered research with the elderly people and augmented reality experiments and so on. This idea of the screens on the elderly is really like an extra barrier, but I would love to see what happens and what they would think of such a device going around the city, going around their homes.
Yeah, something they're familiar with in terms of the form factor, but
yeah, they're used to. That's totally more like. Well, I'm also thinking of myself actually going forward.
You're not elderly.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it would be a nice experiment if the guys met at the beginning of the year.
There's a whole layer of history as well behind objects that you could explore.
Yeah.
Like helping people understand, archaeology better and what happens in certain parts of the ground that you can't see.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Maybe I can use the flash.
It doesn't require any focus. It's immediately focused on any surface. And machine learning also came out earlier. Yes, like 0. And actually the iMac is the server in this case. It's running the machine learning. It needs a GPU. But in the future there's also something that's being released by NVIDIA called the Jet server, which is kind of like a Raspberry Pi, but it has like yes, this is the basic projector.
Of course, yeah. I know your pain. I also did a lot of drawing.
I mean, I love these
Different reasons.
Just try to make it, I know it might sound really complicated if I explain the technology, but I want to make sure it's as simple as possible.
I found actually it's a good because I found that to me it feels like within the map and then it's like just shining a light and then when it finds something
Just the voiceovers
versus it's like a, I don't know, like a
yeah.
Maybe we get haptic feedback in that.
I'll be joining you.
I'm interested if you separate the rest from the actual projector. Imagine if you had someone wearing the electronics now. And then
Yeah, I'm run through
This is actually a small application in the market today. It's the size of my small one of the ones here in Taiwan is much bigger. It's from South Korea. I guess it can be much smaller than this is the battery here for it. I would be more concerned about the battery than the controller. It's like power. And this thing just
We were drinking last night.
to us, right?
I want like a pro watch.
Yeah.
Can't really do that.
It's better than I say you smell like.
One of them also finished like an exam today, yesterday, so
I think 3 hours.
I'm getting drunk.
I haven't anywhere like I did. So this
But I found out that my roommate is full.
Everything is the same.
wow.
That's You would never see him, you would never imagine. That's the weird part.
It's okay.
Epic process video.
Guys, just